The prescription bottle trembled in Millie's hands as she watched her husband Logan shuffle through their modest living room. His shoulders slumped in what she believed was crushing depression. For 2 years, she had watched the man she loved disappear before her eyes, or so she thought. What she didn't know was that every stumble, every vacant stare, every tortured sigh was a carefully rehearsed performance. And when Dr. Sarah Smith looked up from Logan's file that Tuesday morning, the color drained from her face as she whispered words that would shatter Millie's world forever. What happened next didn't just expose the most elaborate con in their small Ohio town's history. It revealed the unbreakable strength of a woman who had survived foster care, loneliness, and betrayal, only to discover that her greatest weakness would become her most powerful weapon. Millie Williams had always believed that love found you when you least expected it. At 46, she had resigned herself to a life of quiet routine. Her job as an HR manager at Midwest Pharmaceutical Distribution, her small house on Maple Street, and her evening ritual of microwave dinners and crime documentaries. She had grown up bouncing between foster homes, never staying long enough to form lasting bonds, never trusting enough to let anyone get too close. Independence had been her armor, solitude her sanctuary. Then Logan Hayes walked into her life like a gentle breeze on a summer evening. They met through Second Chances, a matchmaking service for people over 40. Logan's profile was refreshingly honest, a divorced warehouse worker, no children, looking for simple companionship. His photo showed a man with kind eyes and graying temples, someone who looked like he understood disappointment but hadn't let it make him bitter. When they met for coffee at May's Diner on Route 23, Millie felt something she hadn't experienced in decades: hope. Logan was everything he claimed to be and nothing she expected. He listened when she talked about growing up in care, never offering empty platitudes or trying to fix her past. He worked third shift at the Dayton Distribution Center, came home tired but never complained. He was quiet, steady, reliable, everything the men in her foster families had not been. When he proposed after 8 months of dating, presenting her with a modest ring from Murphy's Jewelry, Millie said yes through tears of disbelief. They married at the Franklin County Courthouse on a crisp October morning, with only Mark Davidson, Millie's boss and longtime friend, serving as their witness. Mark had harbored feelings for Millie for years, but he pushed aside his own heartache to walk her down the aisle and wish her happiness. The reception was lunch at Applebee's, and Millie had never felt more content. For the first year of their marriage, life was beautifully ordinary. Logan worked his shifts, Millie managed employee relations at the pharmaceutical company, and they built a routine around small pleasures: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday drives through the countryside, quiet evenings reading together on their secondhand sofa. Logan was attentive without being clingy, affectionate without being demanding. He integrated seamlessly into her world, even joining her for the monthly foster care advocacy meetings she attended. But during their second year together, something began to change. It started subtly, Logan sleeping later on his days off, showing less interest in their weekend drives. Millie attributed it to the natural ebb and flow of any relationship. When he began calling in sick to work more frequently, she assumed the physical demands of warehouse labor were wearing on his 50-year-old body. When he started staring blankly at the television for hours, barely responding to her questions, she wondered if he was simply tired. The real shift came when Logan began talking about feeling worthless, about being a burden to her. He would sit at their kitchen table, head in his hands, speaking in barely audible whispers about how empty everything felt. Millie's heart broke watching the man she loved disappear into what she recognized as severe depression. Having grown up in a system where mental health was rarely addressed properly, she was determined to get Logan the help he needed. She researched depression symptoms online, bought books about supporting a depressed spouse, and gently encouraged Logan to see a doctor. He resisted at first, claiming he just needed time to work through things on his own. But as his condition seemed to worsen, sleeping until mid-afternoon, neglecting personal hygiene, barely eating the meals she prepared, Millie became increasingly worried. The turning point came when Logan lost his job. His supervisor called Millie directly, expressing concern about Logan's excessive absences and erratic behavior when he did show up. The man described Logan as seeming lost and disconnected, sometimes found sitting in his truck in the parking lot, staring into space. Millie's guilt was overwhelming. She should have acted sooner. She should have forced him to get help. That evening, she sat Logan down for a serious conversation. Through what appeared to be tremendous emotional effort, he agreed to see a doctor. Millie scheduled an appointment with Dr. Sarah Smith, a general practitioner at Franklin County Medical Center who had a reputation for being thorough and compassionate. The earliest available appointment was 3 weeks away, during which time Logan's condition seemed to deteriorate further. He would disappear for hours at a time, claiming he needed to drive around to clear his head. When he returned, he would often seem more agitated, muttering about feeling trapped and hopeless. Millie began working from home on his worst days, afraid to leave him alone. The financial pressure was mounting. Logan's unemployment benefits barely covered his portion of their expenses, and Millie found herself dipping into her savings to keep them afloat. Mark noticed the strain Millie was under. She had always been professional and composed at work, but now she seemed distracted, tired, worried. During their weekly department meetings, he watched her struggle to focus, saw her checking her phone anxiously for texts from Logan. When she asked for emergency time off to handle a family crisis, Mark didn't hesitate to approve it, even offering to cover her responsibilities himself. The night before Logan's doctor's appointment, Millie barely slept. She had prepared a list of his symptoms, researched treatment options, and even looked into local mental health support groups they could attend together. She was determined to be Logan's advocate, to help him find his way back to the light. In the early hours of the morning, she found him sitting on their back porch, smoking a cigarette, a habit she thought he had quit years earlier. "I'm scared, Millie," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "What if the doctor says I'm beyond help? What if this is just who I am now?" Millie sat beside him, taking his trembling hand in hers. "Then we'll figure it out together. We'll try different treatments, different doctors, whatever it takes. You're not alone in this, Logan. I'm not going anywhere." Logan squeezed her hand, and for a moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not the spark of hope she was hoping for, but something else, something she couldn't quite identify. Relief, perhaps, or maybe determination. Later, she would understand that what she saw was the look of a predator confirming his prey was still firmly caught in his web. The next morning, Tuesday, October 15th, they arrived at Franklin County Medical Center 15 minutes early for Logan's 10:30 appointment. The waiting room was typical of small-town medical facilities: outdated magazines, uncomfortable chairs, and the persistent smell of disinfectant. Logan sat slumped beside her, the picture of defeated resignation. Other patients in the waiting room seemed to regard him with sympathetic glances, and Millie felt a protective surge of love for this broken man who was trying so hard to get better. When the nurse called Logan's name, Millie stood to accompany him, but he shook his head weakly. "I think I need to do this first part alone," he said. "It's hard enough to talk about this stuff. Maybe you could join us after I've had a chance to explain things to the doctor?" Millie understood. Mental health was deeply personal, and she didn't want to pressure him. She kissed his forehead gently and settled back into her chair to wait. 20 minutes passed, then 30. She tried reading a magazine, but couldn't concentrate. Through the thin walls, she could occasionally hear the murmur of voices from the examination room, but couldn't make out words. When the door finally opened, Logan emerged looking drained, but somehow different. Dr. Smith followed him out, and Millie was immediately struck by the woman's expression. Instead of the professional compassion she expected to see, there was something harder in the doctor's eyes, something almost like alarm. "Mrs. Hayes?" Dr. Smith said, her voice carefully controlled. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Logan started to protest, but Dr. Smith held up a firm hand. "Just for a few minutes. Why don't you wait in the lobby? We'll be right there." Something cold settled in Millie's stomach as she followed the doctor back into the examination room. Dr. Smith closed the door carefully and gestured for Millie to sit down. The woman's hands were visibly shaking as she opened Logan's file. "Mrs. Hayes," Dr. Smith began, then stopped, taking a deep breath. "I need to ask you something very important, and I need you to answer me honestly. How long have you known your husband?" The question caught Millie off guard. "We've been married for 2 years, together for 3. "Why? What does that have to do with his depression?" Dr. Smith was quiet for a long moment, studying Millie's face carefully. "I recognized your husband the moment he walked into my office," she said finally. "His name isn't Logan Hayes. It's David Brennan, and he's not depressed. He's one of the most sophisticated con artists I've ever encountered. The words hit Millie like a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt, and she gripped the arms of her chair to keep from falling. I'm sorry, what did you say? 5 years ago, he married my sister Rebecca under the name Michael Torres. He presented the same symptoms: depression, job loss, financial difficulties. For 3 years, he systematically drained her bank accounts, stole her jewelry, even took out credit cards in her name. When she finally discovered the truth, he disappeared overnight. Rebecca lost her house, her savings, everything. She still hasn't fully recovered financially or emotionally. Millie's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. No, that's not possible. Logan isn't, he wouldn't. You must be mistaken. Dr. Smith leaned forward, her expression grave. Mrs. Hayes, I stared at this man's face every Christmas for 3 years. I watched him destroy my sister's life with the exact same performance he's giving you right now. The depression, the job loss, the financial dependency, it's all calculated. He's not sick, Millie. He's dangerous. The use of her first name broke something open inside Millie. The professional distance Dr. Smith had been maintaining dissolved, replaced by sisterly concern. You said he lost his job recently? Millie nodded numbly. And I'm guessing your savings have taken a hit supporting him through this difficult time? Again, Millie nodded. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Logan's mysterious drives when he disappeared for hours. His access to her bank statements, her credit card information. The way he always seemed to know exactly what to say to make her feel guilty for questioning his behavior. How much money are we talking about? Dr. Smith asked gently. About $15,000 from my savings so far, Millie whispered. But I thought it was temporary, until he got better. Dr. Smith shook her head sadly. Rebecca thought the same thing. By the end, he had stolen over $60,000 from her. Credit cards, personal loans taken out in her name, family heirlooms sold while she was at work. And the psychological damage was even worse than the financial loss. Millie felt like she was drowning. 2 years of marriage, of love, of building a life together. Had it all been a lie? If this is true, she said slowly, if he's really this David person, why are you telling me? Couldn't you get in trouble for sharing medical information about another patient? He's not my patient, Dr. Smith said firmly. The moment I recognized him, this stopped being a medical consultation and started being a public safety issue. I have an obligation to warn potential victims. And Millie, you are very much still a victim. This isn't over. What do you mean? Men like David don't just disappear when the money runs out. They escalate. They become more desperate, more dangerous. Rebecca's case ended when she discovered he had been planning to forge her signature on documents to remortgage her house without her knowledge. If she hadn't caught him, she would have lost everything. Millie's phone buzzed with a text message. Her hands shook as she read it. Taking a walk around the building while you two finish up. Feeling a little overwhelmed, but hopeful. Love you. He's texting me, Millie said, showing Dr. Smith the message. He seems so normal. That's what makes him so dangerous, Dr. Smith replied. He's had years to perfect this persona. The man you fell in love with, the man you married, none of that was real. It was all designed to make you trust him, to make you want to take care of him. The full scope of the betrayal was beginning to hit Millie. Every tender moment, every vulnerability she had shared, every time she had comforted him through his supposed mental anguish, it had all been manipulation. She thought about the nights she had held him while he cried about feeling worthless, the mornings she had called in late to work because he was having a bad day, the sacrifices she had made to support what she believed was his healing journey. What should I do? Millie asked, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. First, don't let him know that you know. Men like David can become unpredictable when they realize their con has been exposed. Second, you need to protect yourself financially. Check your credit reports, change your banking passwords, secure any assets he might have access to. Third, you need evidence. Evidence. If you want him to face consequences for what he's done, you'll need proof. Rebecca didn't have enough documentation to press charges successfully. David was too careful, too methodical. But if you can gather evidence of his real identity and his theft, you might be able to prevent him from doing this to someone else. Millie thought about this. The idea of continuing to live with Logan, David, while knowing the truth seemed impossible. But the alternative was letting him disappear again, free to find another vulnerable woman to destroy. How would I even begin to gather evidence? Millie asked. Dr. Smith hesitated. I probably shouldn't be giving you advice about this. But Rebecca always regretted not being more proactive. She felt like she failed not just herself, but all his future victims. The doctor pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down a phone number. This is Detective Martinez with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. She worked Rebecca's case. She might be able to give you guidance on how to proceed safely. Millie folded the paper carefully and put it in her purse. Her mind was spinning with questions, but she knew she needed to get back to Logan before he became suspicious. What should I tell him about this conversation? Nothing specific, just that I recommended some lifestyle changes and possibly seeing a specialist. Keep everything as normal as possible until you have a plan. As Millie stood to leave, Dr. Smith caught her arm gently. Millie, I know this is devastating, but I need you to understand something. The fact that you were targeted doesn't reflect any weakness on your part. Men like David are professionals. They study their victims. They know exactly what to say and do to gain trust. You survived the foster care system. That takes incredible strength. You're going to need that strength now. Walking back to the lobby, Millie felt like she was moving through a dream. Everything looked the same. The outdated magazines, the uncomfortable chairs, the smell of disinfectant, but she was seeing it all through different eyes. When she spotted Logan sitting in a corner chair, scrolling through his phone, she had to fight the urge to run. He looked up as she approached, his expression carefully arranged into one of anxious hope. How did it go? What did she say? Millie forced herself to sit down next to him, to take his hand in hers as she had done thousands of times before. But now his skin felt foreign, dangerous. She thinks you might benefit from seeing a specialist. Someone who focuses specifically on depression and anxiety. Logan's face fell convincingly. I was afraid of that. It's worse than I thought, isn't it? She said it's treatable. Millie lied smoothly. But it might take time and patience. We'll get through this together. Logan squeezed her hand, and she saw tears forming in his eyes. Even knowing what she now knew, the performance was so convincing that she felt a flicker of doubt. Could Dr. Smith be wrong? Could there be some mistake? But then she noticed something she had never seen before. A small tattoo on Logan's wrist, partially hidden by his watch. It looked like initials, R.B. Rebecca Brennan, perhaps? The sister Dr. Smith had mentioned? The sight of it sent a chill through her body. The drive home was torture. Logan kept up a steady stream of conversation about the appointment, asking questions about what the doctor had said, expressing gratitude for Millie's support. Every word felt like a knife in her back. How long had he been planning this? How much more of her money did he intend to steal? What was his endgame? When they got home, Logan said he wanted to take a nap. The emotional exhaustion of the appointment had worn him out. Millie agreed that rest was a good idea, and she went to her home office to make some calls. Her hands shook as she dialed the number Dr. Smith had given her. Detective Maria Martinez answered on the second ring. When Millie explained who she was and why she was calling, there was a long pause. Dr. Smith called me right after you left, Detective Martinez said. She was worried about your safety. I have to ask, does your husband have any idea that you know the truth? No, I don't think so. But Detective Martinez, are you absolutely certain this is the same man? Because the person I married doesn't seem capable of this kind of deception. Ma'am, I've been working fraud cases for 15 years, and David Brennan is one of the most skilled con artists I've ever encountered. He doesn't just steal money. He becomes exactly the kind of man his victims need him to be. What did you need most when you met him? Millie thought about this. Stability, I guess. Companionship without drama. Someone reliable. And that's exactly what he gave you, until he didn't. Mrs. Hayes, I need you to understand that you are in a dangerous situation. Men like Brennan don't stop until they're forced to stop. And when they feel cornered, they can become violent. Violent. Millie's voice cracked. Logan has never laid a hand on me. He's gentle, almost fragile. Rebecca Smith thought the same thing, right up until the day she confronted him with evidence of his theft. He didn't hit her, but he destroyed her house, broke furniture, threw her belongings around, threatened to kill himself if she called the police. The psychological intimidation was severe. Millie closed her eyes, trying to imagine the man sleeping in her bedroom turning violent. It seemed impossible, but then again, 12 hours ago, she would have said it was impossible that he was a con artist. What should I do? She asked. First, you need to secure your finances immediately. Change all your passwords, contact your banks, freeze your credit. Do it from work or somewhere he can't overhear you. Second, we need to gather evidence of his true identity and his theft. That's going to be the tricky part. How do we do that? We need to catch him in the act. Rebecca wasn't able to prove theft because he was always careful to make transactions look legitimate. He had her bank cards, her passwords, her permission to handle finances. But if we can get him on camera accessing your accounts or admitting to his real identity, we'll have grounds for charges. The idea of secretly recording Logan made Millie's stomach turn, but she understood the necessity. What kind of evidence would we need? Video or audio of him admitting to being David Brennan would be ideal. Proof of him accessing your financial accounts without permission. Documentation of his lies about his identity, his employment history, his past marriages. The more we have, the stronger the case. And in the meantime, I just continue living with him, pretending everything is normal? I know it's difficult, but yes. The moment he realizes you're onto him, he'll either disappear or escalate his behavior. Neither option is good for you. But Mrs. Hayes, you don't have to do this alone. I'm going to give you my personal cell phone number. If you feel unsafe at any point, you call me immediately. After hanging up with Detective Martinez, Millie sat in her office for a long time, staring out the window at the life she thought she knew. The small house she had been so proud to share with Logan now felt like a prison. The wedding photos on her desk mocked her, images of what she now knew was an elaborate performance. She forced herself to think practically. First, finances. She logged into her bank account and was relieved to see that no new transactions had occurred since yesterday. But when she looked more closely at the past 6 months, patterns emerged that she had been too trusting to notice before. Small withdrawals, always just under the amounts that would trigger alerts. Transfers to accounts she didn't recognize. Purchase authorizations she didn't remember making. The total was staggering. Over the past 6 months alone, nearly $8,000 had disappeared from her accounts in increments small enough to escape her notice. $8,000 on top of the $15,000 she had willingly given him for expenses during his unemployment. Millie changed all her passwords, set up account alerts for any transactions over $50, and called her credit card companies to add fraud protection. She also opened a new savings account that Logan would have no access to or knowledge of. All of this took nearly 2 hours, and by the time she finished, she could hear Logan moving around upstairs. Millie, he called down. I'm feeling a little better. Maybe we could make dinner together tonight. That sounds wonderful, she called back, her voice sounding surprisingly normal to her own ears. I'll be right up. That evening, as they cooked dinner together, Logan chopping vegetables while humming softly, Millie stirring pasta sauce, she watched him with new eyes. Every gesture, every expression, every word was now suspect. When he told a story about his childhood, she found herself wondering if any of it was true. When he complimented her cooking, she questioned whether it was genuine or calculated. The most disturbing part was how natural he seemed. There were no obvious tells, no moments where the mask slipped. If Dr. Smith hadn't recognized him, Millie might have continued believing his performance indefinitely. After dinner, Logan suggested they watch a movie together. He chose a romantic comedy, something light to match his improved mood after the doctor's visit. As they sat on the sofa, Logan's head resting on her shoulder, Millie found herself studying the tattoo on his wrist. The initials R.B. were small and faded, as if he had tried to have them removed, but given up partway through the process. Logan, she said carefully, I noticed you have a tattoo. What do the initials stand for? For just a moment, she felt his body tense. But when he lifted his head to look at her, his expression was perfectly innocent. Oh, that old thing. It's embarrassing, actually. A girlfriend from high school. Rachel Barnes. We thought we were going to get married, but obviously that didn't work out. I keep meaning to get it covered up, but laser removal is so expensive. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that Millie almost believed him. Almost. But she had seen the flash of calculation in his eyes before he answered, the split second where he had to decide what story to tell. The next few days were agonizing. Millie went through the motions of their normal routine while secretly documenting everything she could. She photographed Logan's identification documents when he left them lying around, researched his claimed employment history, and tried to verify details from the stories he had told her about his past. Nothing checked out. The warehouse where he claimed to have worked had no record of a Logan Hayes. The apartment he said he had lived in before they met had been occupied by an elderly woman for the past decade. Meanwhile, Detective Martinez worked on verifying David Brennan's criminal history. What she found was disturbing. Over the past 15 years, he had been connected to at least 6 cases of domestic fraud, operating under different names in different states. The pattern was always the same. Target vulnerable women, usually those without strong family support systems, present as a stable partner, gradually gain access to their finances, then disappear when the resources were exhausted. He's incredibly sophisticated, Detective Martinez explained during one of their phone calls. He researches his targets extensively before approaching them. Dating websites, social media, public records. He learns exactly what they need to hear, what their vulnerabilities are, how to present himself as the solution to their problems. How did I end up on his radar? Millie asked. Probably through the matchmaking service. Those databases are gold mines for predators. They contain detailed information about people's relationship history, financial status, living situations, everything he would need to identify ideal targets. The revelation that her search for love had essentially been a shopping trip for a con artist was almost too much to bear. But Detective Martinez helped her channel her pain into determination. The good news is that he's gotten overconfident, the detective said. Staying in one place for 2 years, using the same identity for an extended period, that's unusual for him. Usually he disappears after 6 to 8 months. The fact that he's still here suggests he thinks he's found the perfect setup. What does that mean? It means he's planning something bigger. The small withdrawals, the gradual financial drainage, that might just be the appetizer. Men like Brennan don't usually invest this much time unless they're setting up for a major score. This possibility terrified Millie. What did Logan have planned? Forgery? Identity theft? Was he planning to disappear with her life savings? Or was he building towards something even worse? Her answer came the following week, when she arrived home from work to find Logan in their bedroom, going through the filing cabinet where she kept important documents. He was so absorbed in his task that he didn't hear her come upstairs. She watched from the doorway as he photographed her passport, her social security card, and various financial documents with his phone. Millie quietly backed away and went downstairs, her heart pounding. She called Detective Martinez from the kitchen. He's documenting my identity, she whispered into the phone. What does that mean? It means we need to move fast, Detective Martinez replied. Identity theft at that level suggests he's planning to disappear soon and take as much as he can with him. We need to get him on record, and we need to do it now. That night, following Detective Martinez's instructions, Millie placed a small digital recorder in their bedroom. She felt sick doing it, but she understood that without evidence, Logan would simply disappear and continue his pattern with other victims. She had a responsibility not just to herself, but to all the women who might come after her. The next evening, Millie decided to force the issue. She had prepared carefully, scripting out her approach with Detective Martinez. The goal was to get Logan talking about his past, to create inconsistencies in his story that might cause him to slip up. They were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner when Millie brought up the subject of his family. You never talk much about your childhood, she said casually. Were you close to your parents? Logan's expression became appropriately melancholy. Not really. My dad left when I was 12, and my mom struggled with alcohol. I pretty much raised myself. That must have been difficult. Do you ever think about looking them up? Social media makes it so easy to reconnect with people now. My mother died about 10 years ago, Logan said quickly. Car accident. And I have no interest in finding my father. Millie nodded sympathetically while making mental notes. Earlier that day, Detective Martinez had found records for David Brennan's actual parents, both alive and living in Arizona, according to recent public records. Logan's story was falling apart, but she needed him to say something more incriminating. What about siblings? She pressed. Any brothers or sisters? No, just me. Another lie. David Brennan had a younger sister living in Colorado. I sometimes wonder what it would have been like to have siblings, Millie continued. Someone to share memories with, to help fill in the gaps about family history. I know so little about my own past because of the foster situation. Logan reached across the table and took her hand. We're each other's family now, he said tenderly. That's all that matters. The words that had once comforted her now made her skin crawl. She forced herself to squeeze his hand in return. You're right, she agreed. Though I have to admit, I sometimes worry about financial security. Growing up with nothing makes you paranoid about losing what you have. Logan's expression shifted slightly, becoming more attentive. What kind of financial worries? Oh, the usual stuff. Making sure we have enough saved for emergencies, planning for the future. I've been thinking about consolidating some of my accounts, maybe moving money around to get better interest rates. She watched Logan carefully as she spoke and saw something sharpen in his eyes. That sounds smart, he said. I could help you research the best options. I'm good with numbers. Would you? That would be such a relief. I've been feeling overwhelmed trying to manage everything on my own. That night, Millie lay awake listening to Logan's breathing, wondering if he was really asleep or if he was planning his next move. The recording device sat hidden in her jewelry box, and she prayed it would capture something useful. Her prayers were answered the next afternoon. Millie had called in sick to work, telling Logan she was going to spend the day resting. Instead, she parked at the end of their street and walked back to the house, entering through the back door as quietly as possible. She could hear Logan on the phone in the living room. No, the setup is perfect. She's completely trusting, no family to ask questions, and she's got at least 50,000 liquid plus whatever I can get from credit applications. Logan's voice was different, sharper, more confident, completely unlike the defeated man he portrayed for her benefit. Millie crept closer, using her phone to record what she was hearing. Identity documents are all copied. I just need another week or two to set up the transfers. Yeah, I know it's taking longer than usual, but this one's worth the investment. She's got a steady job, good credit, owns her house outright. I'm thinking I can walk away with at least $100,000, maybe more if I play it right. The person on the other end of the call said something that made Logan laugh, a sound Millie had never heard from him before. It was cold, calculating, completely devoid of the warmth she associated with her husband. David Brennan is officially dead and buried, Logan continued. Logan Hayes is the perfect husband, complete with depression and financial problems. She's so busy taking care of me that she doesn't even notice the money disappearing. It's beautiful, really. Millie had heard enough. She quietly backed out of the house and drove to the police station, her hands shaking so badly she could barely steer. Detective Martinez was waiting for her. I got it, Millie whispered, holding up her phone. I got him admitting everything. Detective Martinez listened to the recording with a grim expression. This is exactly what we needed, she said finally. We have admission of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Plus, the fact that he's using an alias gives us federal jurisdiction. This man is going away for a long time. What happens now? Now we set a trap. We're going to let him think his plan is working, right up until the moment we arrest him. The next phase of the operation required Millie to continue her performance for several more days, while Detective Martinez coordinated with federal authorities. The hardest part was acting natural around Logan while knowing that every kindness she showed him was being exploited, every concern she expressed was being used against her. But Millie found strength she didn't know she possessed. The scared foster child who had spent her life trying to make herself small and unnoticed was gone, replaced by a woman who understood her own worth and refused to be anyone's victim. She thought about Dr. Smith's sister Rebecca, about all the other women Logan had destroyed, and she channeled her anger into cold determination. The end came on a Thursday evening. Detective Martinez had arranged for Logan to receive a fake call about a financial opportunity, supposedly a tip about a vulnerable widow he might want to target next. The caller claimed to be someone from his network of con artists, though actually it was an undercover federal agent. Millie was at work when the call came through, but she had left the recording device active in their bedroom. When Logan thought he was alone in the house, he took the call and began discussing his plans for Millie's money in explicit detail. He talked about forged signatures, fraudulent loan applications, and his timeline for disappearing with her assets. He even bragged about how easy it had been to manipulate her emotions, describing her as desperate and pathetic. The federal agents moved in that evening. Millie was asked to stay late at work while the arrest took place, though Detective Martinez called her as soon as Logan was in custody. It's over, Millie, the detective said. David Brennan is in federal custody. He won't be conning anyone else for a very long time. When Millie finally returned home that night, the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if a malevolent presence had been lifted. She found a note from the FBI explaining that certain items had been confiscated as evidence. but most of her possessions were untouched. The agents had been surprisingly respectful, understanding that she was a victim, not a co-conspirator. In the days that followed, the full scope of Logan's deception became clear. He had been building toward a massive fraud that would have left Millie financially ruined and emotionally destroyed. Credit applications in her name, forged documents preparing to transfer ownership of her house, even fake medical records suggesting he was dying and needed expensive treatment, all designed to extract every possible dollar before he vanished. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit traced Logan's activities across multiple states and identities. The man she had known as Logan Hayes was actually David Brennan, who had also operated as Michael Torres, James Patterson, and Robert Clark. His criminal career spanned nearly 2 decades, and Millie was just the latest in a long line of victims. But unlike the others, Millie had fought back. The trial took place 8 months later. Millie testified about the emotional manipulation, the financial theft, and the devastating discovery of Logan's true nature. She spoke clearly and confidently, no longer the timid woman who had been so grateful for any scrap of affection. Logan's defense attorney tried to paint her as a co-conspirator, suggesting she had been aware of the fraud, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded phone calls, the fake identity documents, the testimony from his previous victims, it all painted a clear picture of a predator and his prey. Logan was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. He would also face charges in 2 other states where similar crimes had been uncovered. As he was led away in handcuffs, he looked at Millie one last time. She saw no trace of the gentle, broken man she had married. The mask was completely gone, revealing the cold calculation underneath. The financial recovery was more complicated. While Millie was able to reclaim most of the money Logan had stolen, the emotional recovery took much longer. She spent months in therapy, working through the trauma of discovering that 2 years of her life had been an elaborate lie. The hardest part wasn't the money or even the betrayal. It was learning to trust her own judgment again. But Millie was stronger than she had ever imagined. The little girl who had survived the foster care system, who had built a life for herself through determination and hard work, proved that she could survive this too. She took classes in financial planning, learned about fraud prevention, and eventually began speaking at community groups about warning signs of romantic con artists. 6 months after Logan's sentencing, Mark Davidson finally found the courage to ask Millie out for dinner. He had waited patiently through her ordeal, offering quiet support without pressure or expectations. When she said yes, it was with the knowledge that she was choosing someone who had seen her at her most vulnerable and most strong, and who valued both versions of her. Their relationship developed slowly, built on genuine friendship and mutual respect rather than desperate need or manipulation. Mark never tried to fix Millie or treat her as damaged goods. Instead, he celebrated her resilience and supported her advocacy work with other fraud victims. A year later, when Mark proposed, with a ring he had secretly been saving for since before Logan ever entered their lives, Millie's answer was different than it had been with Logan. Instead of grateful tears and disbelief, she felt calm certainty. This was what real love looked like, patient, honest, and utterly without hidden agendas. The small wedding ceremony took place in the same courthouse where she had married Logan, but everything else was different. Detective Martinez attended as a friend. Dr. Smith and her sister Rebecca came to celebrate Millie's triumph, and several other women Millie had met through victim support groups witnessed her new beginning. Instead of a desperate woman grateful for any attention, Millie walked down the aisle as a survivor who had learned her own worth. During her victim impact statement at Logan's sentencing, Millie had said something that surprised even her. "You taught me that I'm stronger than I ever knew. You tried to break me, but you only revealed how unbreakable I really am. I'm grateful for that lesson, even though I wouldn't wish the way I learned it on anyone else." Logan's con had been elaborate and nearly perfect, but it had one fatal flaw. It underestimated the target. He had seen Millie's kindness as weakness, her trust as naivety, her desire for love as desperation. He had never considered that those same qualities, kindness, trust, and love, could become weapons in the right hands. The woman who had grown up believing she wasn't worth much had discovered that she was worth fighting for. The woman who had accepted crumbs of affection had learned to demand real love. The woman who had been invisible had found her voice and used it to protect others. So if you've ever wondered whether someone can completely fool you, whether love can blind you to obvious red flags, whether you'd be strong enough to survive such a profound betrayal, remember Millie's story. Remember that the qualities that make us vulnerable to predators, our capacity for love, trust, and compassion, are not weaknesses to be ashamed of. They are strengths to be protected and channeled properly. And if you find yourself in a situation where something doesn't feel right, where stories don't add up, where your instincts are whispering warnings that your heart doesn't want to hear, remember that trusting yourself isn't betraying your partner. It's protecting yourself and everyone who might come after you. The greatest revenge against someone who tries to break you isn't anger or hatred. It's refusing to let them succeed. It's rebuilding yourself stronger than before, finding real love after fake love, and using your experience to protect others from the same fate. Millie Williams learned that the hard way, but she learned it. And in learning it, she became unbreakable. Today, Millie and Mark run a nonprofit organization that educates people about romance fraud. They've helped dozens of victims recognize and escape similar situations, and their work has contributed to the prosecution of several other con artists. Millie's house is filled with thank you letters from women and men whose lives were saved by learning to recognize the warning signs she wished she had known. Logan, David Brennan, sits in federal prison, his con artist career finally over. Sometimes Millie wonders if he thinks about the woman he underestimated, the victim who became a survivor, the Mark who became a warrior. She hopes he does. She hopes he remembers that the kindest targets can become the most dangerous enemies, and that underestimating someone's strength is the biggest con of all. Because in the end, that's what this story is really about. Not the con artist who was so clever, but the woman who was clever enough to stop him. Not the predator who was so dangerous, but the prey who became more dangerous still. Not the victim who was broken, but the survivor who refused to stay broken. That's the real power of this story. It reminds us that we're all stronger than we know, braver than we believe, and more valuable than anyone who tries to take advantage of us will ever understand. And that's a lesson worth remembering, whether you're facing a con artist, a toxic relationship, or any other challenge that tries to convince you that you're powerless. You're not powerless. You never were. Just ask Millie.